I gave my husband a beautiful handmade book of our memories, but he rolled his eyes, called me useless, and told me he was leaving me to start a new life with his 20-year-old mistress. He didn't understand when I started laughing, and was in shock when I said that. Inside of the book I had included AA, useless, Todd muttered, tossing the book onto the table like it was trash. I stared at him, my chest tightening. What? This, he said, gesturing dismissively at the handmade scrapbook I'd spent weeks creating. This is the best you could come up with? A pile of pictures and sentimental garbage? You're ridiculous, Lydia. My hands clenched in my lap, but I forced myself to stay calm. I thought you'd appreciate something meaningful. It's a collection of memories, everything we've been through together. He rolled his eyes. What we've been through? Please, I'm tired of all this overly emotional crap. You could have gotten me something useful, but instead you waste time on this nonsense. It's embarrassing. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the sting of his words from showing on my face. Todd, I know, he interrupted, standing up and running a hand through his hair. You don't get it, do you? This isn't working anymore. You're not working anymore. I need someone who can actually add value to my life, not drag me down with this pathetic attempt to be thoughtful. My stomach twisted. What are you saying? He smirked, crossing his arms. I'm leaving you, Lydia. I've met someone else, Mara. She's 20, exciting, and she actually knows how to have fun. Unlike you. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I refused to let him see the impact. And you think this is the right way to tell me? I asked, my voice trembling but steady. After I put my heart into this? He laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. Your heart? That's the problem, Lydia. You're all heart and no substance. I deserve more. I sat there in silence for a moment, his words echoing in my head, and then to my own surprise I started to laugh. It wasn't a bitter laugh or a forced one. It was genuine, loud, and it cut through the tension in the room like a knife. What's so funny? Todd asked, narrowing his eyes. I stood up, still laughing, and reached for the book. You don't even know what you're walking away from, I said, flipping to the back page. What are you talking about? He asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. I pulled out the folded deed tucked into the final page and held it up. This, the deed to a vacation house I bought for us. I was going to surprise you tonight, but I guess that's off the table now. His jaw dropped. You bought a vacation house? I smiled sweetly, slipping the deed into my purse. Looks like Mara won't be enjoying that, will she? Todd's face twisted into something between disbelief and panic. For the first time all evening, he was at a loss for words. You bought a house? He finally stammered, his smug confidence crumbling. Since when do you make decisions like that? I tilted my head, my smile never wavering. Since I realized I can't depend on you for anything meaningful, Todd. While you were busy finding excitement with a 20-year-old, I was building a future for us. Silly me for thinking we wanted the same things. He opened his mouth to retort but closed it again, his eyes darting to the book still lying on the table. It was as if he were trying to figure out how this had slipped through his fingers. You're overreacting, he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. This doesn't change anything. Mara and you? I cut him off, shaking my head. Todd, I don't care. Take her. Take your exciting life and get out of mine. You've made it abundantly clear where I stand. I walked out of the living room and into the bedroom we once shared, the sound of Todd's sputtering excuses following me. As I packed a small overnight bag, I could hear him pacing, probably trying to figure out how to salvage the situation without admitting he'd completely miscalculated. I paused for a moment, staring at the photos on the dresser, wedding pictures, trips we'd taken, moments that once seemed so full of promise. They felt like relics from another life, one I'd been clinging to for far too long. By the time I returned to the living room, Todd was standing by the door, his arms crossed in what I assumed was an attempt to look composed. You're really just going to leave? He asked, his tone incredulous. I am, I said simply, brushing past him. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're being petty, Lydia. You'll regret this. I paused at the door, turning back to face him. Maybe, but at least I won't regret staying in a marriage where I'm nothing but a punchline to you. With that, I stepped outside, the night air cool against my face. I felt the weight of Todd's expectations lift off my shoulders. As I drove away, the deed safely tucked in my bag, I realized I wasn't leaving with just my belongings. I was leaving with something far more valuable, the clarity that I deserved better. Let Todd have his fun. I was done playing the part of the loyal wife in his selfish little game. I drove straight to Grace's house. She was the only person I could think of who would truly understand what had just happened without judgment. When she opened the door, she took one look at me and frowned. What did he do this time? Can I come in? I asked, my voice steady but tired. She stepped aside, waving me in. Of course. Kitchen or living room? Kitchen, I said, knowing she'd already be reaching for the wine. Minutes later, we were seated at her small kitchen table, a glass of Merlot in front of me and her undivided attention across from me. So, she said, leaning back in her chair. Spill. I took a deep breath, recounting everything, from the scrapbook to Todd's cruel words, to his grand announcement about Mara. By the time I got to the part about the vacation house, her jaw had dropped. He called you useless after all you've done for him, she said, her voice rising with indignation, and then had the audacity to tell you he was leaving for some 20-year-old? Are you kidding me? I shook my head, swirling the wine in my glass. Nope, that's Todd, always so self-assured, always thinking I'd just roll over and accept it. But you didn't, Grace said, a smile breaking through her anger. You walked out, you took back the house. And honestly, Lydia, good for you. Hearing her say it out loud made something inside me shift. I hadn't just walked away from Todd. I'd walked away from years of trying to be someone he could appreciate, someone who would never be enough for him. What now? Grace asked, snapping me out of my thoughts. I don't know, I admitted. I've been so wrapped up in making our marriage work. I don't even know who I am outside of it. Grace reached across the table and placed a hand over mine. You figure it out one step at a time. But first, you stay here tonight. No arguing. I smiled. Thanks, Grace. Later that night, as I lay on the couch in her living room, I felt the exhaustion of the day finally catch up to me. But beneath the tiredness was something else, relief. Todd was no longer my problem. For years, I'd bent over backward to make him happy, and now I didn't have to. I didn't know what the future held, but I was excited to find out. The morning after I left Todd, I woke up in Grace's living room to the sound of my phone vibrating relentlessly on the coffee table. Groaning, I reached for it, squinting at the screen. Missed calls, 6, text messages, 14, all from Todd. I unlocked my phone, scrolling through the barrage of messages. Where did you go? We need to talk. You're being childish, Lydia. You can't just walk away like this. The last one made me laugh bitterly. Walk away? That's exactly what he told me he was doing last night. Grace wandered into the room, a cup of coffee in hand. Let me guess. Todd? Bingo, I muttered, holding up the phone. He's losing it. Well, what did he expect? She said, setting the coffee down in front of me. You don't get to treat someone like garbage and then act shocked when they stop putting up with it. I nodded, sipping the coffee. He's not used to consequences. He's always gotten away with everything. His arrogance, his selfishness. But this time, he's not getting what he wants. Damn right he's not, Grace said, a satisfied grin on her face. Later that day, I received another text, but this one caught my attention. I'll come by the house later. We need to sort this out, my house. He was still acting like it was his, like he had any right to come and go as he pleased. I thought about replying, telling him to stay away, but then I remembered something Grace had said the night before. Let him stew in it for a while. Instead, I ignored the text and spent the day with Grace, helping her with errands and catching up on parts of my life I'd neglected for years. By the time I returned to my house that evening, Todd's car was already parked in the driveway. I parked on the street, taking a deep breath before walking up to the door. He was pacing in the living room when I walked in, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. You finally decided to show up, he said, his voice sharp. I live here, I replied calmly, setting my purse down on the counter. What are you doing here? We need to talk, he said, his tone softening. This has gotten out of hand. I folded my arms, leaning against the counter. What's gotten out of hand, Todd? The fact that I finally stood up for myself? Or the fact that you're realizing Mara isn't the prize you thought she was? His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he might explode, but instead he sat down on the couch, running a hand through his hair. Look, I made a mistake. Okay? I wasn't thinking clearly, but we can fix this. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Fix this? Todd, this isn't a broken vase. This is years of you taking me for granted, dismissing everything I do, and expecting me to keep smiling through it. Lydia, he started, but I cut him off. No, I said firmly. You don't get to decide when we fix things. You made your choice. Now you can live with it. I grabbed my bag and walked upstairs, leaving him sitting there in stunned silence. The day after Todd's tantrum, I packed his things, left them neatly by the front door, and changed the locks. When he came back that evening looking smug as ever, I met him on the porch with a firm expression and a folder in hand. What's this? He asked, glancing down at the papers I held. Your things, I said, gesturing to the suitcase by the door. And this is the contact information for the lawyer I hired this morning. You'll be hearing from her soon. His jaw tightened, but he still couldn't resist one last dig. You're being ridiculous, Lydia. You can't handle life without me. I smiled faintly. We'll see about that. Now get off my porch. He stared at me, his confidence finally faltering before grabbing his suitcase and stalking off. Over the next 2 weeks, Todd's absence felt like a breath of fresh air. The house was quieter, cleaner, but it felt like a home instead of a battlefield. I stayed busy, throwing myself into work, reconnecting with friends, and leaning on Grace for emotional support. She was thrilled to see me finally standing up for myself. Good riddance, she'd said when I told her I'd kicked Todd out. He was a leech, Lydia. You're better off without him. I knew she was right, but there were moments, quiet ones, usually late at night, when doubt crept in. Had I really done the right thing? What if I ended up regretting it? Those thoughts didn't last long though, especially not after I got the call from Todd. Lydia, he said, his voice tight with frustration. We need to talk. I sighed, already tired of the conversation before it began. What do you want, Todd? It's Mara, he said, bitterness dripping from every word. She's gone. The corner of my mouth twitched. Is that so? She laughed at me. He spat, the words coming out in a rush. She said I was pathetic. Said I threw away the only good thing I had going for me. She couldn't believe I let you keep the house. Now I was smiling outright. Ah, the house. I'm sure that stung. She said I was an idiot, he continued, ignoring my sarcasm. A complete loser for losing everything you'd worked for. And then she walked out. It was almost too satisfying to hear. The man who dismissed me, belittled me, and thought he could replace me with someone younger was finally facing the consequences of his actions. And now you're calling me because? I asked, my tone cool. Because I made a mistake, he said, his voice dropping. A huge mistake. Can we talk, please? I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. No, Todd, we have nothing to talk about. You made your bed. Now you can lie in it. Before he could respond, I hung up, letting the silence settle around me like a warm blanket. That night as I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, I felt a deep sense of relief. Todd's life was unraveling, but for the first time, it wasn't my problem. I had my life back, and I wasn't looking back. The divorce process moved faster than I'd anticipated. My lawyer helped me organize my finances, document everything, and ensure that I'd be protected. Now, as I sat in her office reviewing the finalized paperwork, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, closure, and a lingering twinge of disbelief that this chapter of my life was finally ending. "Everything looks solid," my lawyer said, flipping through the pages. "Todd doesn't have much leverage here, especially since he hasn't contested anything. Frankly, I think he knows he's not in a position to fight you." I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I think he's finally realized I'm not the pushover he thought I was." She chuckled. "I'd say you've made that very clear." As I left her office that afternoon, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying seemed to lift. The paperwork was filed, my finances were secure, and Todd was officially out of my life on paper and in reality. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. That same evening, Grace came over with a bottle of wine and her usual flair for celebrating my victories. "To Lydia," she said, raising her glass, "the woman who finally kicked Todd to the curb and reclaimed her life." I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. "To Grace, the friend who never once said, 'I told you so.'" "Not yet anyway," she teased, taking a sip. As the night went on, we talked about everything. My plans for the future, her latest escapades, and of course Todd's dramatic fall from grace. "So," Grace said, leaning back on the couch with a smirk, "do you think he's still crying over Mara?" "Probably," I replied, grinning. "But it's not like he has much else going for him. No wife, no house, no mistress. Honestly, I almost feel bad for him." "Almost," Grace said, laughing. That night after Grace left, I sat alone in the quiet of my home reflecting on everything that had happened. The old me, the one who bent over backward to keep Todd happy, who worried endlessly about his approval, felt like a distant memory. This new version of myself, the one who could laugh at his downfall and find joy in reclaiming my life, was here to stay. Todd had underestimated me, but I hadn't. I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The weeks after the divorce were a whirlwind of change, but the chaos felt like mine to control. Without Todd's shadow looming over every decision, I found myself rediscovering the pieces of me that had been buried under years of his criticism and demands. It wasn't just about rebuilding, it was about thriving. One of the first things I did was visit the vacation house. For so long it had been this abstract symbol of hope, a promise of something better for our future. But now, it was mine, completely untethered from Todd or his arrogance. When I pulled up to the property, nestled against the backdrop of a serene lake and surrounded by towering pines, I felt a rush of pride. I'd done this. I'd made this dream a reality, not for Todd, not for us, but for me. Inside the house was everything I'd imagined. Cozy but spacious, with large windows that framed the picturesque view. I spent the weekend there alone, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and savoring the peace that came with knowing I no longer had to share it with someone who didn't value me. Grace came to visit the following weekend, bringing her usual brand of contagious energy. "This place is amazing," she said, spinning in a slow circle in the living room. "How did you keep this a secret for so long?" "I don't know," I admitted, laughing. "I think I wanted it to be perfect before I shared it with anyone. And honestly, part of me was afraid Todd would ruin it." "Well, it's perfect now," she said, plopping onto the couch. "And you deserve every bit of it." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sunlight streaming through the windows. I felt like I truly deserved something good. As the weeks turned into months, I started to fill my life with things I'd put on hold for too long. I took up photography again, spending hours capturing the beauty of the lake and the surrounding woods. I joined a local book club, something Todd had always scoffed at as a waste of time, and I started traveling, not for work, not to meet anyone's expectations, but simply because I wanted to. Each new experience felt like a small rebellion against the version of myself I'd been with Todd. I wasn't just living, I was thriving. One evening as I sat on the deck of the vacation house with a glass of wine in hand, I thought about the life I'd left behind. There was no anger anymore, no bitterness, just gratitude for the lessons I'd learned and the freedom I'd gained. A few months after the divorce was finalized, life felt like it had finally settled into a new rhythm. The vacation house became my sanctuary, a place where I could be alone with my thoughts or invite friends over to share the peace I'd found. Grace visited often, usually with a bottle of wine and stories about her latest adventures. "You've completely transformed, you know that?" she said one evening as we sat by the fire pit overlooking the lake. I looked at her, raising an eyebrow. "Transformed how?" Grace grinned. "The old Lydia? She would have been fussing over everyone else's comfort, worried about whether the cushions were fluffed or the glasses were filled. This Lydia?" She gestured at me, sitting in sweatpants with a cozy blanket wrapped around my shoulders. "She's relaxed, happy, and not giving a damn about what anyone thinks." I laughed, sipping my wine. "I guess I've realized I can only control my own happiness. Trying to make Todd happy was like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it. It was never enough." Those lessons extended beyond the house too. I started freelancing, something I'd always wanted to do but never pursued because Todd thought it was too unstable. Now my schedule was my own, and the freedom was exhilarating. One of my clients, a design firm, invited me to lead a workshop for their team. The experience reignited a confidence in me I hadn't felt in years. "Why haven't you started your own business?" the CEO asked after the workshop. The question lingered in my mind long after I left the meeting. Why hadn't I? A few weeks later, I started laying the groundwork for my own consulting firm. It was terrifying, but for the first time I wasn't holding myself back out of fear of failure, or worse, Todd's disapproval. Grace cheered me on every step of the way, even helping me come up with a name for the business. Phoenix Consulting, she suggested, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Because you've risen from the ashes like the badass you are? I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help smiling. Phoenix Consulting it is. As I poured myself into building the business, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. Every small win, a new client, a glowing review, a successful project, was a reminder of how far I'd come. And for every win, there was a quiet moment of gratitude. Gratitude for the strength I'd found, for the friends who'd supported me, and for the chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. One evening, as I sat on the deck with my laptop, finalizing plans for a new project, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Todd. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a moment before deleting the message without replying. Some things were better left in the past. 6 months after I walked away from Todd, I stood on the deck of the vacation house watching the sun dip below the horizon. The lake shimmered with hues of orange and pink, the kind of view that used to feel like a luxury, but now felt like a promise I'd made to myself and kept. I had built a life I was proud of. Phoenix Consulting was thriving, far beyond what I'd imagined when I started. The freedom to choose my clients, my hours, and my projects made me feel alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. Grace visited that evening as she often did, carrying a box of pastries from a local bakery. "You know, I never thought I'd say this," she said, setting the box on the table. "But I think Todd did you a favor." I laughed, pouring us both a glass of wine. "You're not wrong. If he hadn't been such a jerk, I might still be stuck trying to make him happy." She raised her glass. "To Todd, the world's most clueless man, for setting you free." We clinked glasses laughing, but her words stayed with me long after she left. I'd been so focused on moving forward that I hadn't stopped to reflect on just how much had changed. The timid version of myself who constantly sought Todd's approval felt like a stranger now. This new life wasn't just about escaping a bad marriage, it was about rediscovering who I was, what I wanted, and what made me happy. And I felt like I knew the answers. As the stars began to dot the sky, I grabbed a notebook and pen, jotting down ideas for the future. A new marketing strategy for Phoenix Consulting, a list of places I wanted to travel to next. Goals I hadn't dared to dream of until now. Not that later, as I closed the notebook and looked out at the lake, I realized something. I wasn't just free from Todd's expectations. I was free from my own doubts, the ones that had kept me small and scared for so long. A month later, I received an email from one of my new clients. The subject line read, "Keynote Opportunity." Curious, I opened it and scanned the message. They wanted me to speak at an upcoming industry conference about my journey as an entrepreneur, highlighting the success of Phoenix Consulting. For a moment I hesitated. Public speaking had never been my strong suit. Todd had often mocked me for fumbling over my words during casual conversations, let alone something as formal as a keynote speech. But this time, his voice didn't matter. I hit reply and typed, "I'd be honored to participate." Preparing for the keynote became a new focus, and with Grace's encouragement I poured my energy into crafting a speech that felt authentic. "Don't sugarcoat anything," Grace advised. "Tell your story the way it is. Failures, triumphs, all of it. That's what people connect with." And that's exactly what I did. The day of the conference arrived, and as I stood backstage waiting for my turn to speak, I felt a familiar mix of nerves and excitement. When the host introduced me, I walked onto the stage to polite applause. Taking a deep breath, I began. "My name is Lydia, and a year ago I never would have imagined standing here. Back then, my life revolved around trying to meet the expectations of someone who didn't believe in me. But today, I'm here because I chose to believe in myself." As I spoke, sharing the story of how Phoenix Consulting was born from a place of rediscovery, I noticed heads nodding in the audience. People were leaning in, smiling, and even jotting down notes. I felt like my voice mattered, not just to me but to others. After the speech, several attendees approached me to share their own stories of struggle and resilience. "You inspired me today," one woman said, her eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you for reminding me it's never too late to start over." Her words stayed with me as I left the conference feeling more empowered than ever. That evening, as I sat on the deck of the vacation house, I thought about everything that had led me here. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the doubts. It had all been part of the journey. Todd was a distant memory now, his texts and calls long ignored. Mara had been right. He was a loser. But I didn't need validation from her, him, or anyone else. I had built a life I loved, one step at a time, and it was just getting started. This was my story now, and I was writing every word. The family reunion. My mill forced me to sleep in the cold basement. "Servants belong downstairs," she laughed. Next morning the real estate agent arrived. "Mrs. Miller, your $12 million mansion is ready for inspection." My mill's champagne glass shattered on the floor. I've always believed that true character reveals itself in how people treat those they think can't benefit them. My name is Emma Miller, and this is how I learned just how right that belief was. Growing up, my parents taught me the value of hard work and humility. My father was a janitor at a prestigious tech company, and my mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. They worked themselves to the bone to give me an education, often going without so I could have what I needed. "Emma, sweetheart," my mother would say, her hands rough from years of scrubbing. "Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you." Those words echoed in my mind as I worked my way through college, studying finance and computer science. By day, I attended classes. By night, I cleaned offices just like my father. But I had a secret that kept me going. I was developing a revolutionary financial algorithm that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. During my final year, while most students were partying, I was perfecting my program. Then one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. My algorithm caught the attention of a major investment firm. They offered me $75 million for it, plus a position on their board. I accepted the deal but kept my wealth hidden. I continued living modestly, investing wisely, and growing my fortune quietly. That's when I met James. He literally ran into me at a small cafe where I was working on my laptop. Hot coffee splashed across the table, barely missing my computer. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, frantically grabbing napkins. His genuine distress made me laugh. "It's okay," I assured him, helping to clean up. "I'm Emma." "James, please let me buy you another coffee. It's the least I can do." One coffee led to dinner, and dinner led to more. James was kind, funny, and refreshingly down to earth. He worked as a high school teacher, passionate about making a difference in his students' lives. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. Then I met his family. Patricia, my mother-in-law, lived in a sprawling house in an upscale neighborhood. Her husband Robert had passed away years ago, leaving her a comfortable inheritance from our first meeting. She made it clear I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her son. "A cleaner's daughter," she said, eyeing me over her wine glass. "How quaint." "James, darling, I thought you were dating that lovely doctor's daughter, Caroline." "Mom," James warned, but the tone was set. At every family gathering, Patricia found ways to remind me of my place. She'd ask me to help the catering staff, claiming I feel more comfortable in the kitchen. When James defended me, she'd laugh it off as just trying to make Emma feel at home. Her daughter, my sister-in-law, Amanda, was cut from the same cloth. A successful real estate agent, she never missed an opportunity to flaunt her success or remind me of my humble beginnings. "And my dear," she'd say with false sweetness, "I have some clients looking for a cleaning service. Should I give them your mother's number?" I took it all in stride, partly because I knew the truth about my wealth, but mostly because I wanted to see people's true colors. James would squeeze my hand under the table, whispering apologies for his family's behavior, but never truly standing up to them. What they didn't know was that I have plans of my own. I've been quietly buying properties throughout the city, including several in Patricia's prestigious neighborhood. The mansion next door to hers had been on the market for months, and through a series of shell companies, I acquired it for $12 million. The annual family reunion was approaching, a 3-day affair where relatives from across the country gathered at Patricia's house. This year, however, would be different. "James, honey," Patricia announced at dinner a week before the reunion, "I've arranged the guest rooms. You'll stay in your old room, of course. Emma can use the basement. We need the good rooms for family who actually contribute to our gatherings." James shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, Emma's my wife, and as my daughter-in-law she should be grateful for whatever accommodation she receives." Patricia cut in smoothly. "Besides, with her background she's probably used to much worse." I simply smiled and said, "The basement will be fine, Patricia." If only she knew what was coming. The reunion began on a Friday. Cars filled Patricia's circular driveway as family members arrived. I helped carry luggage, serve drinks, and endure the usual snide comments about my background. That evening, as everyone settled into their luxurious guest rooms, I made my way to the basement with my small suitcase. The basement was cold and musty with a narrow cot set up in the corner. As I sat on the creaking bed, I heard laughter floating down from above. Patricia's voice carried clearly through the vents. "Can you believe she actually took the basement without complaint?" I told James he should have married Caroline. At least she knows how to carry herself in proper society. More laughter followed. I checked my phone. One new message from my property manager. "Everything is ready for tomorrow's inspection, Mrs. Miller. The mansion next door has been fully furnished according to your specifications." I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would certainly be interesting. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I woke early, my back aching from the basement cot, and made my way upstairs. The kitchen was already bustling with activity as Patricia directed the catering staff for the day's brunch. "Oh, Emma, good. Since you're up, make yourself useful and help Maria with the dishes," Patricia commanded, not even looking in my direction. "And do try to stay out of sight when the guests arrive. We have some very important people coming today." I caught James's eye as he entered the kitchen. He looked pained but remained silent, reaching for his coffee. The familiar sting of his passive acceptance made me straighten my shoulders. "Just a few more hours, actually," I said calmly, checking my watch. "I have an appointment this morning." Patricia's head snapped up. "An appointment? During our family reunion? How incredibly rude." "Now, Mom," James began weakly, but Amanda cut him off as she swept into the kitchen. "Mother, the Hendersons just pulled up. You know, the ones who bought that gorgeous mansion next door." She smirked at me. "They're my biggest clients this year. The sale was worth $1 million in commission." Patricia preened. "Wonderful. Emma, before you leave for whatever menial task you have planned, at least make yourself useful and help serve the Moses." I smiled. "I really must go. My real estate agent is waiting." "Real estate agent?" Amanda scoffed. "What are you looking at, studio apartments in the bad part of town?" The doorbell rang, and Patricia hurried to answer it, shooting me a warning look. I followed the group into the grand foyer where a sophisticated woman in a sharp suit waited. Good morning, Mrs. Miller, she said, smiling directly at me. The mansion is ready for your final inspection. The room fell silent. Patricia's carefully crafted smile froze on her face. There must be some mistake, she said with a forced laugh. Emma isn't. Emma Miller, I confirmed, stepping forward, owner of the mansion next door. Amanda's mimosa glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. That's impossible. I handled that sale. Through my shell corporation, yes, I said pleasantly. I believe your commission check was quite substantial. James stared at me, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his mouth. Emma, what's going on? Perhaps we should all sit down, I suggested, gesturing to the living room. I have quite a story to tell. Once everyone was seated, Patricia and Amanda perched on the edge of their seats like birds ready to take flight. I began. 7 years ago, I developed a financial algorithm that sold for $75 million, I said calmly. Since then my investments have multiplied that many times over. The mansion next door is just one of many properties I own. But you let us think, Patricia sputtered, that I was a cleaning lady's daughter who married above her station. I finished. Yes, I did. And you all showed me exactly who you are through how you treated someone you thought was beneath you. This is absurd. Amanda stood up, her face flushed. Mother, she's clearly lying. My real estate agent cleared her throat. I can assure you, Mrs. Henderson, that Mrs. Miller's credentials are impeccable. In fact, she owns controlling interest in the development company that built this entire neighborhood. Patricia's face had gone from red to white. The entire neighborhood, including this house, I confirmed quietly. I bought it last month when it was technically still under your late husband's estate. The paperwork was finalized yesterday. The silence that followed was deafening. James had sunk into his chair, his face a mask of shock and dawning realization. You mean? Patricia's voice trembled. This isn't my house anymore. It's mine, I said simply. Just like the basement where you made me sleep last night. Amanda jumped up. Mother, she can't do this. We'll fight it in court. You're welcome to try, I replied. My lawyers have ensured everything is perfectly legal, but right now I'd like you both to leave my house. Leave? Patricia gasped. But where will I go? This is my home. Was your home? I corrected. Don't worry. I've arranged for temporary accommodations for you. There's a modest apartment available in the building where my parents used to work as janitors. I hear the basement unit is particularly cozy. The family gathering had devolved into chaos. Relatives whispered among themselves, some looking shocked, others secretly pleased to see Patricia's pride take such a fall. James finally found his voice. Emma, why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. I turned to face my husband. Would it have made a difference? Would you have stood up to your mother's treatment of me if you'd known I was wealthy? Because if money is what it takes to earn basic respect in this family, then we have bigger problems than where I sleep. The real estate agent cleared her throat. Mrs. Miller, shall we proceed with the inspection of your new property? Yes, I said, standing. Patricia, I'll have my staff help you pack. You have until tomorrow evening to vacate the premises. As I walked toward the door, Patricia's voice rang out, suddenly honey and pleading. Emma, dear, surely we can discuss this. We're family after all. I paused at the doorway, turning back to face her. Family? Let's talk about family, Patricia. Last Christmas you seated me at the children's table and told everyone it was because I wouldn't know how to behave at the adults' dinner. Last month you accidentally excluded me from James's birthday celebration. And just yesterday, you made me sleep in a basement because you said I wasn't good enough for a real room. I didn't mean, she scammer. Yes, you did, I said firmly. You meant every slight, every insult, every attempt to humiliate me. You showed me exactly who you are, Patricia. Now I'm showing you exactly who I am. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor echoed through the silent house as I walked out, head held high. Behind me I could hear Patricia's sobs and Amanda's angry protests, but I didn't look back. The following weeks were a storm of activity and emotions. Patricia and Amanda moved out as required, though not without drama. They hired lawyers, of course, but as my legal team had predicted, every transaction was ironclad. I moved into the mansion next door, leaving James to decide his own path. The distance gave me time to think about our marriage and what it meant to build a life with someone who couldn't stand up for you. One evening, about a month after the revelation, my security team alerted me to a visitor. James stood at my front door looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I led him to my home office, a warm room filled with family photos, including one of my parents on their 30th anniversary. James's eyes fixed on it as he sat down. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, about everything. About us. I've also been seeing a therapist. I waited, letting him find his words. I failed you, Emma. Not just at the reunion, but every time I let my mother treat you like you are beneath us. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was just being a coward. Yes, you were, I agreed softly. He winced but continued. The thing is, I kept wondering why you didn't tell me about your success. Then I remembered last Thanksgiving when Mom made that comment about your father being just a janitor, and I laughed. I actually laughed. Tears formed in his eyes. That's when you were going to tell me, wasn't it? I nodded. I had the papers in my bag. But watching you laugh at your own father-in-law, I realized that you were just like them. I was, he admitted, and that shame is mine to carry. But Emma, I want you to know what's happened since you left. He straightened in his chair. I resigned from my teaching position at Brighton Prep. This surprised me. James had taught at the prestigious private school for years. I took a job at Riverside High School instead, he continued. It's in the neighborhood where you grew up. The kids there, they remind me of you. Brilliant, determined, just needing someone to believe in them. And your mother, I haven't spoken to her since she moved out. She and Amanda have been trying to rally the family against you, but it backfired. Cousin Sarah came forward about how Mom had treated her when she married beneath her station. Then Uncle Robert shared stories about her behavior toward his second wife. It's like your courage in standing up to her gave others permission to speak their truth. I absorbed this information, noting the changes in James. He seemed more grounded, more present. There's more, he said. I've been volunteering at the community center where your mom used to work. Did you know they have a program teaching financial literacy to cleaning staff and janitors? I'm helping them expand it. Why are you telling me all this, James? Because I want to earn back your respect, he said simply. Not because you're wealthy, but because you're the same amazing woman who helped me grade papers until midnight and made soup when I was sick. I was too weak to deserve you before. I want to become someone who does. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Patricia. Your mother's at the apartment building. I told James. She's demanding to speak with me. You don't have to go, he said quickly. Actually, I think I do. I found Patricia in the basement apartment where she now lived. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Her designer clothes looked out of place against the concrete walls. Hello, Patricia. She turned, and I was struck by how different she looked. The carefully maintained facade had cracked, showing the insecure woman beneath. Emma, she said, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Finally, she whispered, I understand now. Understand what? What it feels like to be judged by where you live? To have people look down on you? Her hands trembled. Yesterday I couldn't get a restaurant reservation because of my new address. Me, I've been going there for 20 years. Feels awful, doesn't it? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I've been horrible, not just to you but to so many people. Living here, being treated the way I treated others, it's opened my eyes. That was the point, I said quietly. She looked up sharply. You mean, this wasn't just revenge? Revenge would have been making you homeless. This was about education. Patricia sank onto the small sofa. I've lost everything. My home, my social standing, my son. You haven't lost James, I corrected. He's choosing to be his own man for the first time. Whether you lose him permanently depends on whether you can accept that change. And you? She asked hesitantly. Have I lost you as a daughter-in-law? I studied her carefully. That depends on you too, Patricia. Real change takes more than a few weeks of humility. Will you help me? She asked softly. I don't mean financially. I mean help me learn to be better. It was the first time I'd ever heard genuine vulnerability in her voice. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner party. Patricia was there, wearing a simple dress rather than her usual designer labels. She helped in the kitchen not because anyone asked her to, but because she wanted to. Amanda came too, having recently started volunteering at a women's shelter, a requirement I'd added to release when she asked to rent one of my properties. James and I were still working on our marriage, picking things day by day. He'd proven his commitment to change, not through grand gestures but through consistent actions and unwavering support. As we sat down to dinner, I looked around the table. My parents were there. My father deep in conversation with James about the financial literacy program, which had expanded to 3 more community centers. My mother and Patricia were exchanging recipes. Their previous class barriers dissolved. Emma, Patricia said during dessert, I wanted to thank you. For what? For teaching me that true worth isn't about where you live or what you own. It's about how you treat people. She smiled salely. I just wish I'd learned that lesson sooner. Later that night, as James and I stood on our balcony overlooking the neighborhood, he asked, Do you regret any of it? I thought about the past year, the pain, the growth, the transformations. No, I said finally. Sometimes people need to lose everything to understand what really matters. He took my hand, and we stood in comfortable silence watching the stars. The basement apartment where Patricia lived was visible from our vantage point, its lights glowing warmly in the darkness. It stood as a reminder that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to become better than they were. My phone buzzed a message from my investment team about another successful algorithm deployment, but for once, I didn't check it immediately. Some things were more valuable than money, and I was finally surrounded by people who understood that truth.